Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Markham, so I'm the CEO and founder of iCoTech. And we're here today with Derron and Giles, and I'll introduce those guys shortly. But thank you very much for joining. So this is our second roundtable. We're excited about this. Our first one didn't quite go to plan, but as two project practitioners, me and Giles took the initiative and just pivoted down a different path and had to run with the first one. So this one is hopefully going to go more to plan than the first one did. But this one is all about the value of a PMO. So we've got Derron here from Maxica, who's going to take us through his kind of opening slide deck and summary of the topic, which is great. And thank you for Derron for doing that, for agreeing for doing this, because I know it takes up a lot of your time, and we really do appreciate it. But as always, as this is a Teams live event, it's a bit new for me, so it's a bit unusual not seeing everybody on the call. So I almost feel a bit blind to this, but if you want to interact with the session, we really do encourage that. The last session worked really well because of the number of questions we had in the Q&A window. I know Teams changes a lot on us quite frequently at the moment, but in the top right hand side of my Teams window, I've got two square boxes, and one of them at the forefront of that has got a question mark in it. If you click on that, you'll be able to post a question. And then Lauren can publish that question to our queue, and we can answer any questions that you have. So yeah, thank you for joining. Any questions, any feedback? We do really want feedback from these sessions going forward. Please do email us at info@icotechservices.co.uk, or contact me or Giles or Derron on LinkedIn. Yeah, thank you very much for attending, much appreciated. So as I said, this call is all about understanding, articulating the value of a PMO. So this is really pertinent to myself and Giles. We have run portfolio management offices before in a number of different sectors and organizations, and I think it's one of those things that's quite close to our heart, is articulating our value as PMO practitioners in an organization, and trying to justify the investment that's needed to making a suitable PMO. Also, there's lots of, I won't go into much detail because I'll steal Derron's thunder, but there's lots of thoughts we have on this pertinent topic at the moment. So I'm going to hand over to Derron and allow him to introduce himself and take us through the slides. Lauren, over to you to move across to Derron, and Derron, thanks for doing this again, and over to you, mate.
Thanks, Giles. So hopefully you can now see my slides.
Yeah.
So thank you. So thank you for inviting me today. It's a pleasure to be here, and hope we can have a lively debate on this quite exciting topic, because I'm very passionate about it as well. So I want to just kick things off with just a quick little intro to me. So I'm Derron Taplin. I'm a project professional of about 25 years experience looking at portfolio management in a number of FTSE 100 companies. I set up Maxica Consulting Limited 8 years ago to extend this knowledge into other areas and other businesses, and we've been very successful in doing that. And as Joel's already said, we've worked together on a number of projects as well. So let's jump into the topic. So, easy question to kick us off. What does the acronym PMO stand for? Pretty simple. Project Management Office? Or is it a Program Management Office? Or does it stand for Portfolio Management Office? So the P in PMO is confusion, and hence leads to different people expecting different things. When these expectations are not met, then the PMO is not providing value. However, the situation in the real world is more complicated, as each PMO can be directive, collaborative, or supportive. And therefore you end up with a blended approach being adopted to what the PMO actually does. So it may be a supportive to projects and programs and directive at a portfolio level, or perhaps programs are not recognised at all, and the role falls to being collaborative at project and portfolio level. So here lies the problem in the value proposition for a PMO. To address the proliferation of permutations of PMOs found in the real world situation, Maxica have decomposed the PMO into micro-activities. Micro-activity is a single function that may or may not be undertaken by a particular PMO. In our example, we've identified 20 micro-activities, which range from driving business case, portfolio reviews, to data cleansing and financials. However, unless you have a large and complex PMO hierarchy environment, it's unlikely that all of these will be in scope of your PMO. So a pick and mix type option is the logical way forward. As each activity represents a function of a PMO, which may or may not be undertaken or required in an organisation, the need is driven by the PMO maturity level and the PMO vision of what the target end state of the PMO will be. Hence, at a portfolio level, it might cover these activities, which include demand management, benefit realisation, strategic alignment, all directly aligned to portfolio level value. In a less mature or simply a differently focused PMO, you may be more inclined to look at project approval boards, resource planning, go to green reviews to improve the project landscape. Or indeed, the PMO may just be looking at the core project management disciplines, such as templates, project controls, reporting. All can add value if resourced and executed correctly. The point here is that there is no single version of the truth, and what is written in a textbook as a PMO model rarely translates accurately into the real world. This is why it's so important to state what your PMO is aiming to achieve and communicate what it will and what it will not be doing. Whatever the mix, the following is true. Projects and programs are operational PMOs and focus on doing things right. And portfolio PMOs are strategic and focus on doing the right things. As doing things right is a given, the perception of value occurs at the portfolio level, because that is where the business owners and executive see it helping to realise the strategic goals and in turn making the business more profitable. Now, project portfolio management has been around for a long time. It's not new or particularly difficult to understand the overarching concepts. In essence, it is simply prioritising work to maximise what can be achieved with a finite amount of money and resource. Unfortunately, project portfolio management is seen by many as the starting point. In fact, this couldn't be further from the truth. In reality, PPM is the result of numerous other factors being successfully in place to provide the mechanism for this to be achieved. PPM is therefore the tip of the iceberg. It's the bit which is highly visible, yields the greatest results, and achieves the biggest pat on the back. So naturally, everybody wants to focus on this important element. However, as with a real iceberg, the majority of the PPM is below the waterline, in the dark, murky depths of programs and projects within the details of these investments, such as project plans, risk registers, program and project boards and reporting. This is where successful project portfolio management needs to start, and this is the failing of many when starting on the PPM journey. For project portfolio management to be truly effective, the capabilities of the business and support teams, IT, facilities, HR, legal, etc., need to be understood and mapped against a maturity scale. Capability-based investment strategy based on enterprise architecture or alike can then provide investment guidance on where capabilities are lacking, or indeed where capabilities are strong and can be leveraged. The primary point here is that PPM is about making strategic investment decisions. Hence, the PPM process needs to be integrated into the organisational strategy. This in turn creates a fundamental entry barrier, as many project teams and the strategic decision makers are segregated by several layers of management, and in some cases, different business divisions. Nevertheless, to yield impressive results, this chasm must be breached. However, all is not lost. This cannot be achieved from the outset. PPM requires organisational change management to be deployed across the business. This in itself is a change programme, and one that should be driven by Project Portfolio Management Office. The standard change management principles apply in that it takes people, processes and technology to make a successful change. The hardest one of these to change is culture, and people. This therefore represents 70% of the change problem. However, we frequently see imbalances with processes and tools without people maturity, creating alienation and underutilized systems. People and tools without processes manifest in itself as chaotic, confusion, and poor customer service. And people and processes without tools delivering frustration and cost inefficiencies. All of these can act as a change inhibitors, as this impacts the project community directly, resulting in chaos, alienation, and frustration. This can establish a negative culture with the PMO and provides little motivation for change. Needless to say, the sweet spot to the art of making change happens when all of these elements are progressed and matured together, making change manageable, useful, and practical. However, the cornerstone of successful PMO is people. Hence, it's largely about changing hearts and minds. The PMO must therefore view the change from the end user's point of view and demonstrate the benefit from those being subjected to the change. Fundamentally, it needs to positively answer the question, what is in it for me? If there is value to the individual in changing, then they will promote it themselves without the need for a carrot and stick encouragement. Therefore, you need to identify the different drivers for the various actors in the organisation and focus on what is important to them. For example, let's look at reporting. What does each role in a portfolio want? So let's look from the bottom upwards. Project manager. In reporting, we'll get a template or maybe automatic reporting, which reduces time being spent on reporting and gives them more time to manage the issues. So there's value. Project executive or sponsor may have a number of reports they need to look at. So common reporting will put all the information in the same place, making it easier to highlight where help is required. Portfolio manager gets comparable metrics across the portfolio of projects, ensuring that value return will be met, or indeed can identify where a project needs to be killed. The project portfolio office gets that holistic view across single or multiple portfolios to provide aggregated reporting and trend analysis. And the portfolio sponsor gets the overall snapshot of the portfolio health, trend analysis, and maybe the top 5 or 10 investments. So we can answer the value question at each level. And if we can do that, then we're going to drive the change forward. Portfolio PMOs are an aggregation of information from various project investments in an organisation. It therefore follows that projects are the foundation of all of this data. Project management has improved considerably in particularly the IT industry. However, some elements of poor or optimistical judgment are still being made, such as project management is a professional full-time job. If you want a professional output, put an experienced project manager on your projects. It is common to see a technical person or an available person to be in charge of a project, but this creates a false economy. It escalates costs, timelines drift, and objectives are missed. If your projects don't have experienced PMs leading them, place them on hold until they do. Lots of organisations have a corporate project methodology. Someone has taken the time to write the company's approach to project management, a significant positive step in the right direction. However, there are 3 areas of common failure. Writing it doesn't mean it will be followed. A number of compliance tactics are needed to be deployed to ensure that existing and new employees and contractors are following the manual. Harmonisation of the methodology needs to be undertaken between regions and departments and divisions so that a common lexicon is established. Duplication and or methodology overlaps are removed or minimised. And the methodology needs to be continuously improved as the business matures and experience is gained. Failure to do so will bring the methodology into disrepute. Programme and project boards are established to provide strategic and operational guidance to the programme and project managers at regular intervals in the project. The board have the accountability for the success of the project, while the PM has the responsibility. However, many boards lack the engagement, skills, authority and time to act in this capacity. As with non-professional PMs running the day-to-day activities of a project, a poorly skilled or attended project board will have a similar effect. It is always worth asking the question, if the project yields a result for the project board, but they're not interested in the project, is the project worth doing? The answer is probably no. So counsel it and save everyone's time, money and resources. Optimise your portfolio. The purpose of a PMO is to become a trusted partner in the project community. Any PMO that sets itself apart from the project community will alienate themselves and become ill-informed of the truth of the project status. Terms such as PMO police, governing, regulators are all warning signs that the PMO approach is wrong according to their customers, the project community. If the PMO can establish a non-blame, non-threatening relationship with project practitioners, then information will start to flow more freely. Helping, supporting, working together to address challenges yields better results for everybody. After all, we're all much more likely to give that little extra for a friend than when we are mandated to do something. Training, coaching and mentoring PMs is therefore paramount to success. It ensures that struggling PMs are helped in a timely fashion. Key performance indicators that make up management information are correct, and it empowers everyone to contribute to the project maturity process. However, this model only works if the PMO staff are experienced professionals and are respected as such within their organisation. Project portfolio management is an independent skill to project and programme management. The need to collaborate with business leaders, IT leaders, demand managers, portfolio managers, programme and project managers is an enormous communication challenge. Everyone wants different things and believes what they have is the best. The portfolio office needs to be politically aware, stakeholder focused, as well as being able to sell the correct messages to enable harmonization. The basic management information data requirements need to be developed in terms of strategic alignment, risk, cost, benefits for all investments, demand and projects in a portfolio. Applying this consistently and repeatedly in the organisation on all in-flight and proposed projects is more of a challenge. Once ranking is established, the human decision-making element of the senior leadership team can take over and sanitize the balance, the final portfolio list of projects. However, it is always easier to do this once the mandatory projects and the low yield projects have been ring-fenced and removed from the decision-making process. Interestingly, one of the very early quick wins of project portfolio management comes when all of the demand and project information is consolidated into one place, be it Excel or a PPM tool. Suddenly, duplication of projects and effort becomes glaringly obvious, along with synergy benefits of the same problem being solved in two different ways in a single organisation. When it is made so obvious, the decision to do something about it is easy. The first triumph for the project portfolio management team in front of the senior leadership team, and costs no more than some good structure, process and communication from some skilled portfolio management resources, and of course our trusted and loyal friend, Excel. High quality PPM starts in the trenches with the project managers and project management processes. PPM is not a sprint, it requires consistent effort to provide an organisational change which is supported by the project community, not imposed on them. The quality of the project data is directly responsible for the credibility of the portfolio office and portfolio metrics, so it has to be right. The information is going before business leaders who are well versed in spotting oddities, so make sure the metrics are right and supported with empirical data. PMOs need to have high caliber, seasoned professionals in post. Likewise, all projects should be managed by experienced PMs. The PMO and PMs must build a solid non-blame relationship and work with each other to gain positive results. If the project fails, the whole organisation fails, not just the project team. Although PPM maturity can take time, it does not preclude enormous benefits being leveraged in the short or medium term. It is common for businesses to make significant cost savings in removing duplication and improving synergies by simply having a comprehensive list of all the projects in one place. My final word is seeing is believing. So showcase the portfolio using real investments so the executive stakeholders can see what they could be getting, and remember to tailor messages to focus on what is important to them. Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers, Derron. Thank you for that, mate. Much appreciated. That was really insightful, actually. There's lots of things that I think I could touch on, I guess, from my experience as well. There's loads of things really. I'm sure we'll have a great debate about it now. But yes, if anybody's got any questions or initial thoughts that they want to fire off to Derron or myself or Giles, then please do use the Q&A feature on the chat window, which is great. But yeah, I think from the top, Derron, your kind of summary of the differences of PMO. What does PMO stand for? You know, project, portfolio, program. There was a couple others I found in my experience as well that were quite interesting. But you know, really understanding the value of the PMO, what it's trying to achieve, is always difficult. And I think you touched base as well on the maturity. So the maturity models, and I wonder, Derron, how many PMOs that you are involved with or go into when you first get engaged with a client, you know, or even, you know, question, do they ever get to level 4, level 5 of the PPM, you know, kind of maturity model in your experience? And do people ever make that investment to get to that level 5 of maturity?
So yeah, it's a very good question. So obviously, when you're talking level 4 and level 5, we just qualify that for the audience. That's obviously on the CMI scale and of being optimized or repeatable processes. So certainly you see different sectors tackling this in different ways. So I would say at the top of the range there, you'd see the finance sector and investment banks. They definitely invest an awful lot of time in those repeatable processes and getting to some level of optimization. And I think their strength in the financial area supports that as well, and needs around NPV and RI calculations for their benefit metrics. In other sectors, certainly we see that being a lot lower. And current survey metrics provide sort of the optimum level around 3.7 on that CMI scale, as the sweet spot between cost and repeatable results from your PMO office.
That's interesting. Giles, how did you ever kind of have that experience of measuring the maturity of the PMO and trying to get it up through those levels?
I think just having a PMO is a good start, to be honest. I think in some of the places I've worked, I think I posted on LinkedIn that like when I first started, I didn't see the value of a PMO. I kind of looked at it, was like, how come we've got a whole bunch of people sat in an office doing PMO stuff when you've got project managers anyway? So what are they doing? But then gradually, as you work through it, you realize actually the scale of work that needs to be tracked, controlled, reviewed. I mean, I really liked Derron's point about cancelling projects. That's something that really resonates with me. It's almost the PMOs provides that visibility on projects, and so the place where I've worked previously, there wasn't that visibility, so leadership wasn't able to make that informed decision on whether a project should go ahead, whether it was on track, whether it needed more funding, whether it needed more resource. So the PMO, there's one of those key things for me, providing that visibility. And Derron, you picked it up on it. And I think getting through to level 4 and 5 is, if you've got a repeatable process and you're in sort of a financial services, much as Derron said, yeah, fair enough. I think you can probably get some of those processes nailed down and go through the same process over and over again. I think in certain areas, so in government where I work, the changing mandate really, that cancelling of projects and changing of priorities and changing of strategy, the PMO has a really important role to play in that. And I say, Derron, have you Joel, you've worked with government organisations, so you kind of seen this as well. But I suppose, Derron, the question to you is working with different types of sectors, the cancelling of projects, sort of who does it well, and why do you think that they do it well?
Our clients do it well, and we give them the tools to do it. No, but seriously, it's there's a number of ingredients which I sort of hinted to there. If you don't have a strategy, it's very difficult to prioritize, because what are you prioritizing against? So lots of organizations will either don't have a strategic vision, or have strategic visions that you can't distill down into goals or metrics that can be measured, and then you're going to have a problem of aligning your projects towards those and measuring those. That presents a problem when it comes to optimizing your portfolio and counseling activities, relying on whether something is going to plan, and whether it's going to deliver on time. So if it's in red, then it might be a candidate to be stopped. But actually, what you should be looking at is this going to give me the biggest return on my investment, and have I actually destroyed the benefit in a particular investment because I've either spent too much money, or I've spent too much time, or perhaps I've missed the window of opportunity. And when you look at time to market for software implementations, it's a really good example of that. If you miss the window and you're second to the market, then you might as well pack up your bags. So there's different drivers. So as I was saying, there's never one size fits all. It's got to fit the organization, and it's got to fit both the internal and external parameters that are applied to that organization. And we've had the most obvious example that we're all still living through with the pandemic, that has had a massive operating shift, and therefore strategic shift in nearly every organization that's on the planet at the moment. And that has created some of those projects to be abandoned or cancelled.
One of the other points I think you raised, Darren, which was really interesting, is getting the right people and skilled resources. I don't know if you see this in industry, and I'll welcome yours and Giles's view on this. But one of the things I, on reflection ahead of this session, recognised was that PMOs, controversial, warning, controversial. But do PMOs ever have really good skilled caliber resources? Or because I think on 3 occasions I've walked into an organization as an employee and had the PMO team built up of junior resources that were administrators that came into the PMO, and it was like an administrator role moved into a PMO, and that was they were inexperienced and they were seen as junior, and potentially not experienced and not skilled resources, and I think that's a reflection on what industry thinks of a PMO. Sometimes it's just a collation of Excel spreadsheets, and I think that's really detriment to the value of what a PMO could deliver. But I just don't know if that's a standard in your experience, Giles, whether you see that, or I just
also
think that
it's like, what are the right skills? I think that's the other thing. So what's interesting is, so when I've worked in PMO or been head of PMO or whatever, it's interesting to see you've got different types of capability in there as well. So you've got people who are badged up, they've got all of them. They've got Agile, they've got Scrum, they've got Prince 2, they've got APM. But you can have all of these qualifications and you can do your 0 to hero qualifications, but actually implementing and actually using those skills those tools from those qualifications is the real evidence of that success and your capability of doing it. I would prefer a person to have one qualification and actually have gone about using that and actually using the tools, rather than someone who has managed to sort of get themselves through multiple courses, which is no doubt an excellent thing as well, because you pick up lots of information from different courses. But I genuinely think that the actual use of tools in PMO, and going back to your point, I think the right capabilities of the staff, but also there's this sort of potentially slight feeling that anyone can work in the PMO, much like you were talking about those staff that have been brought in. Anyone can work in the PMO because it's just a bit of sort of Excel spreadsheet. As long as you can use Excel, you can talk to people. But I suppose with you, Derron, you probably see this when you go in, is that those people who work in the PMO, do they have those right skills, and what are the right skills in your experience?
Yeah, so I think it's a very interesting question, because it's quite difficult to find someone who has all of those skills. It really is a team sport running a PMO. So you need people who are great with sort of business change and communications and stakeholder management. But equally, you need people who are great with the detail and can look at all of the different aspects of that. You might need someone who's great with dashboards, Joel, to sort of pull all this stuff together. So it is a team sport. What I would say is there is a greater understanding now that it takes high caliber people to get a good result. If you populate it with waste and strays or low resourced talent, then you're going to get what you put in, and the same is true obviously if you look at project management or any other discipline. And I always make a parallel when people sort of challenge on whether this person is fit for the PMO. Is you say, well, would you ask that person to go and build the servers for your organisation? And well, no, of course they wouldn't, because they're not a server engineer. Well, why are you asking them to go and do portfolio management if they're not an expert in portfolio management? It's the same situation. It's just that it's unfortunately become seen as a generalist role rather than a specialist role. But I think the tide is turning on that, because the appetite to understand value from change, because change has become quite expensive in our marketplace now, and you need to positively change in the correct direction. And with technology advancing at absolute lightning speed, if that change isn't very deliberate, then you get left behind. And you've only got to look at some of the high flyers that we've got in our industry at the moment. You know, Amazon, Netflix, they've profited very nicely from the pandemic, but that's because they've changed their operating model and they've changed their marketing, they've changed their portfolio of products to actually meet their needs, and that's not being done without deliberate actions internally, and I believe that portfolio management and PMOs will be at the heart of steering that to its destination.
Yeah, I think it's it is interesting topic to debate, I guess. The other thing I think was really interesting in your point was about the methodology, Derron, and I can give you an example of where, in my experience, I'm one of those people who would write the methodology from start to finish and do it in a number of different ways. I just can't function without my Visio and blowing it up on the wall and putting it on the wall and getting people to annotate it and critique it and change it. I remember, standing in front of it, just explaining it to executives, just to senior individuals, and all the way through to, project managers working out what happens next in the process. So I'm really an advocate for writing it down. I see, though, a trend away from that sometimes, and I'll give you an example. It was quite a comedy factor example in my mind, but somebody was, and this is to do with agile versus waterfall, but we won't get into that because that's a whole new round table in itself, I think. Somebody was challenging me in the workplace because I wanted to write down and kind of define the stages in a methodology, and the person actually said to me, pilots don't do this step by step, do they? They're taught to fly. And I remember going back to him saying, I was probably had my little chip on my shoulder, but I was like, actually, unfortunately, a pilot does have a step-by-step checklist in every event of the circumstance, and there's 15 checks you do on start of an engine, and I think that's the reason why aviation is so safe, is because there's processes and defined methodologies for doing things. But I always felt like, as a PMO practitioner, a bit under attack of wanting to write a process and define it. Giles, what's your view on that? Did you ever feel like that, or you probably weren't as OCD as me, I bet. But but yeah,
no, I think you are quite OCD. I think from our when we worked together, it was quite an interesting thing. But it's good to get it up on the board. I mean, like, I've got Notepad here. I like writing stuff down. I like having stuff up on the board, having the visual. That's kind of, and this is going very much off topic about returning to the office. And I won't dig into it, but actually I like having that physical space, and something I've found, it's having that on the board, getting people together, especially in the PMO when you're talking about process, which is what PMOs are looking at, and making sure that that process is followed. Then absolutely having it on the board, getting people's buy-in. And I think that's sort of pushing in towards sort of the leadership and the management side of things, but also I think it's vital for a PMO. And then providing that visibility to other people, those people who are going to be feeding into that process. So when we did the work, we gathered people together who were going to actually utilize the tool or utilize the process. So actually you need to do that, rather than just having this standard thing that you kind of, this is what it is, send out Word documents. So I agree. And I suppose that's for a personal thing that I really value, and something that I think I value when we return to a slightly more office home-based environment.
Yeah. And Derron, do you get that resistance when you go into organizations? Do they normally write it down and define the methodologies and the processes in that way, or are they more relaxed on that?
So I think it's important that you have a common understanding. But I don't think you need to be so draconian over that every single thing has to be done in the same way, because it's just not necessary in a lot of cases. The golden rule is, first of all, that the governance shouldn't be bigger than the project. I know it sounds silly, but you shouldn't spend more time doing the project management than actually the project itself. Secondly, then it has to be fit for purpose, and in that sense, if you're in control of the project, then you're actually achieving the aim, which is to ensure a successful outcome. The touch points are when you want to have that aggregation of information, and therefore you might need to have certain common factors reported through in a consistent way. So a great example of that would be RAG status. You know, you need to define what is red, what is amber, and some others, you know, organisations will have blue or black, you know, in their RAG status as well, and that's fine. But I think the key thing is it has to be fit for purpose, and I think the PMO has a responsibility to look at the options with the project manager and make sure that it is appropriate. And sometimes that'll be, well, you're going to use a waterfall process. Sometimes it might be a hybrid process. Sometimes it might be an agile process. Sometimes it might be a fast track or a light process. But it should be something that is agreed with the PMO. So we're coming back to that central repository of information and knowledge, in the fact that we don't want project managers just arbitrarily deciding in isolation that they're going to not do something or do something. It has to be done with collaboration in mind, and that's what I was sort of hinting at in the presentation. That if you know you've got a friend in the PMO, you're much more likely to go to them and go, "Well, Giles, what do you think I should be doing with this? You know, how do you see this panning out? Because I don't think a full PID and all of the bells and whistles on this is quite the right thing to go, because it's a small piece of work. What do you think? Can I do a light touch on this?" And you might look at it and go, "Makes sense to me." So yeah. I think that's the practical version of the truth, rather than just getting the book out and saying, "Well, the book says you've got to do." So yes, have a framework. But I think you need to have some flexibility and pragmatic approach to what is actually required to get the right outcome.
Yeah, I think on that point with governance, you know, absolutely. I've walked into an organisation, and I think you know, that's a whole new topic in itself. I think in terms of appropriate governance, but you know, I think there was 26 approval points for a project to go through a 7-stage life cycle. 26 approval, and that was 26 boards. You know, that was like CAB, TDA, portfolio board, you know, finance board, and it was like, how many times are you going to go and one of the things I did at that analysis was I said to the team, I said, how many times have you said no in the last year? And it was like, none. So you know, 26 approval boards, you know, a portfolio of 100 odd projects, and they never said no. So that's something that I always learn about appropriate governance. I guess that disvalues PMO, because it was the PMO in general terms that constructed that, and therefore you know, people felt like I think the perception of the PMO at that organisation was that they were, you know, a blocker because there was so many hurdles to go through, and that was just a way of how not to show value of a PMO. And you know, I think I went too far the other way and said we should have one meeting to decide whether we should do it or not. But like, I think I landed somewhere in the middle. But Giles, I guess you must see that, mate. Over governance, you know, detracting from real value of the PMO.
The other issue that I think from looking at over governance is then it drives people to deliver outside of the governance process. So those kind of shadow IT, the black ops projects, those things that you're just like, oh, I'll buy this tool because I've got the funding. So that's a real sort of, that there for me is a getting the balance right, as Derron was saying, and as you were saying, Joel. It's really important to strike the right balance, not being too lax where you just sort of sign whatever off and you just do whatever, but also at the same time, if you push beyond it and you go the other way and you create this sort of monster process, no one will want to come to you to drive value. So then the PMO and whichever department you're assisting, either the project department, digital, sort of where in IT where I work, that sort of, you don't get people coming to you. They end up trying to do things themselves, which then don't align to strategy, which you then end up with technical debt. You have to unpick problems. You have to support things that are being delivered. And that's what I see, is that it's really difficult to create the right balance between a process that provides enough control, overspend, and alignment to strategy, but also that then doesn't go beyond it and become too officious.
Yeah, absolutely. And Derron, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's sort of echoing what I was hinting to in the presentation there around as soon as you get attached to the the sort of PMO police tag, or regulators, or paper pushers, or anything of that nature, you're losing the fight, because people then will try to find ways of going around you rather than complying. We should always be looking at doing the right thing the easiest thing, and doing the wrong thing very difficult. And then naturally people will do the easiest thing, which is the right thing. So by setting up 27 program boards or portfolio boards, you're naturally just setting up yourself for failure. So yeah, I agree that this is not good tact, and certainly if they're not actually doing any of the governance and controls that they're allegedly should have a terms of reference for that board to be doing. They should be validating that this is still a cost positive investment for the organisation.
Yeah. Okay, we've had some great questions coming through the Q&A, so thank you for those who've submitted them, and keep them coming. We really do like lots of juicy questions. I think one of the first ones is actually, what's the best PMO course, I assume they mean training course, to do? Derron, in your experience, if you were going to, somebody wanted to get into the industry and wanted to upskill themselves, where would you point them in terms of the best training course to go and do?
Wow, that's a good question. It's been a while since I've done PMO training courses. Look, as Giles said earlier, it's great to get a certificate, and of course, we've got the you've got P30 and Prince 2, which will give you a great foundation. But you can't beat aligning yourself against somebody who has that experience and seniority and will be able to show you what it really takes to make it a success in the real world, because the book will just show you the tools. It won't show you how to make it a reality in an organization. So if you really want to be good in this space, get yourself in a role with a senior professional who is talented in that particular space, and just soak up as much as you possibly can from them.
Yeah, and my view on it, well, it's interesting to think that in my experience, again, people always did Prince 2 and APMP, and it was almost like bottom up for project managers. I would encourage people to go the other way and go top down. I don't know why, I guess I'm a bit left field, but if you go do a P30 course, managing successful programs, do the portfolio courses top down. I think that just makes you a better project professional if you can understand where you fit into that process. Because Prince 2 was a long time ago, did that, but it was very much in the project scenario, obviously, of how to take a project through a life cycle and all those kind of things, as we all know. But actually, when you're in an organization and you're probably delivering more than just one project, having an understanding of how portfolios work and how you're contributing to the wider direction and strategy and vision of a company, I think is much more important. And then do the Prince 2 later, because it's like getting training budget from an organization. It's quite hard to justify it. I think I would be looking to go and get that next level training and work back to Prince 2. But that's just me being left field on that, I guess. So hopefully that helps that, and thank you for those questions. And there's a couple more questions coming through, so thank you for these. What's the best way to increase the value of a PMO function in a less mature organization quickly? Great question. Thank you to whoever asked that. Derron, I'm gonna pass that one over to you, mate. That's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. The best way to increase value. Again, it comes back to your definition of value. What is it you're trying to increase in that function? So it comes back to that sort of matrix environment of what is the target state for your PMO. If it's to improve your project quality and your project outputs, then certainly you want to be looking at standardizing your PIDs, making sure they go through a quality review process, making sure your reports are being done on a regular cadence, and making sure that information is being shared with the right people. So another mantra that I have is that if it gets measured, it will get done. So nobody wants to do a report that no one ever looks at. So if they know that report is being reviewed by their sponsor, and the sponsor's active and asking questions, that's probably the where you can start that value opportunity. If you're talking about a portfolio level, then absolutely, then the golden rule for me is just get everything in one place. Put all your projects in one place. You'll start to see synergies. You'll start to see duplication. You'll instantly get value out of doing that exercise. I'm not saying that's necessarily easy if you're in a particularly large organization, and it can be a little bit of a challenge, but it will guarantee you to get you some fantastic early wins, and that can then really catapult you forward as a PMO.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Derron. Thank you for that. There's some really great questions here. Thank you for submitting those. I think P3M3, in terms of maturity assessment, the question is, can you recommend a model to check the current maturity level of a PMO, please? Just one thing that I've used before as a self-assessment on the P3M3 maturity model. But Derron, do you have anything that you could add to that in terms of models that you've used before, or that you use in Maxica?
Absolutely. So you're right. This one is very good. There's a heavy version and a light version. We tend to go for the light version, which is sort of a cut down, quick snippet, just to give us a evaluation on 9 key pillars. If you want to do something that is a bit more comprehensive, you can look at COBIT, which gives you a more overview of the entire organization. And PO10 gives you that in the project space. If you want to take an architectural slant on things, you can use open frameworks from IT for IT, or the TOGAF framework for enterprise architecture. So there's a couple of options for you there. Again, it's horses for courses, whatever fits the bill that you're trying to measure in your particular organisation. But yeah, the OGC stuff for PMO, portfolio programs, and projects is a good starting point. If we look at PMI Pulse, which is done by the PMI organisation as well, they tend to benchmark that on a regular basis as well. They have an annual report that comes out. So if you haven't seen that, I suggest getting a copy of that as well. It can be very useful, because with all of these things, it's about peer ranking, and you only have to be better than the peers in your sector. You don't have to be world class.
That's great. Thank you, Derron. I think there's a lot more ideas there to go and look at. So thank you for that. I think the last question on here then is, what is the highest value area of a PMO to initially focus on? Oh God, that's a great question. Giles, which one would you go for first if you were in an organisation, mate? Where would you go and focus on, as an area of the PMO to show the highest value, I guess?
I go back to Derron's point, and I was going to echo what he said. So from my perspective, getting all the information in one place in the same format, so then you can report on it. There's so much value in being able to see what you're actually doing in one place. I think in places I've worked before, you see that information is either kept locally, you don't have the same format that information is collected in, so you can't aggregate that data, you can't look at what's going on across that part of the organization or the whole organization, depending on how big you are. So being able to get a standardized process for reporting and gathering that information, I mean, for me, that's sort of the basic area that I would focus on first, for then generating value to your senior leaders. So you can then show what is working towards their strategy, delivering on their strategy, rather than having just a set of projects that are ongoing, just ad hoc. You can then say, actually, here are your risks, here's where you need to spend resource, etc., etc. So for me, it's that collation, as Derron said, into one place, which then enables reporting. And this is something we worked on, Giles. So something that really showed value in our organization.
Yeah, I didn't want to blow our trumpet too much, but, but yeah, I think where I start is just getting the data into one place. I think getting it out of Excel. I mean, if you can get it out of Excel, please do. Yeah, because but making it autonomous, automated reporting would be great, even if it's just, it doesn't matter what tool or technology you're using. Just showing the level of projects, the sheer the volume of projects that are going on across an organization is really important, because I think I was quite surprised at how many senior leaders didn't understand the level of projects in their portfolio, and only when they really see them in one place do they really understand the level of activity going on, and that's a good way of kind of starting the conversation about your PMO journey. So the next question is, what's the best way to bring that data into one place in terms of industry used tools, successful PMO functions? Oh God, I'm not going to answer that one, because everybody knows what my answer would be, isn't it? But Derron, what do you think in terms of bringing the data into one place? I guess the industry used tools for a successful PMO function.
Well, my answer is probably not going to be dissimilar to yours, to be honest, Joel, because with the advent of Power BI and the amazing advances it's making in very, very short period of time, to take disparate versions of data from different areas and to aggregate it into Power BI, it's a very, very powerful tool for doing that. So this can avoid some of the pain and heavy lifting that you might need to do if you're trying to do it in Excel. If you just point it to Power BI, get a primary key and pivot the information, we've done that, you've done that. It's very, very, very powerful, and actually it takes a little bit of skill and a little bit of understanding, but once you're there, it's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. And if you're not there yet
there are other tools available.
It's a good point, Giles. But the key thing about Power BI is it sits in that M365 stack, and that is highly available to lots of organisations, particularly if you're in government or a charity or university or something of that ilk. It's very, very cost positive to actually have those products. They're very, very low entry point for consuming such high quality tools. And I work for Microsoft. Got no investment with Microsoft, but I have to say they've done a very good job with Power BI, with Teams, with SharePoint. It's coming together quite nicely for world domination on for Microsoft. But they've put a lot of work and understanding into how people need to consume their data.
Absolutely. Thanks, Derron and Giles, for that. I think, and everybody who's asked questions as well, thank you for contributing to the event. We're coming up to 1 minute to the hour, so I'm just going to go to military precision and summarize for I guess the key points that were made from Darren's slide, or my take on it really. But I think really it's important to understand the maturity of your PMO, where you're trying to get to, what you're trying to achieve. As Derron said as well, organizational change management is key to the successful articulation of value and implementation of a PMO function. Reporting, another key point, methodologies, getting them defined, getting them appropriate, with the appropriate governance was one of the words that was used quite a lot in the conversation. And I think it was a theme that we talked about last week, Giles, or last month, which was cancelling projects or prioritization. And yeah, really encouraging to hear Derron kind of echo that and continue that thought of make sure that projects stop when they're not valuable, but also put the right people on them. So having the right skills, do the right jobs, and then making sure people are trained is really important, and the right skill sets. And then absolutely key, again, it's quite interesting how the prioritization conversation links to this one, in that our last roundtables kind of talked about strategic alignment to prioritization, and I guess Derron echoed that as well. So that's my kind of summary of the points that Derron raised, and thank you, Derron, for coming on presenting your view on the value of the PMO. Thanks for Giles for helping me kind of create
Okay.
this content. And just for context and just for kind of finishing off really, all these are recorded. They will be available on YouTube, and also we're looking to get them out on podcasts as well on the iTunes podcast service, so you can listen to them at your leisure when you need to. If you need to get in contact with any of us, then contact myself, info@icotechservices.co.uk. If you want to contact Derron directly, it's Derron Taplin, and it's at maxicaconsulting.co.uk, but we'll send all that details out with you as well. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining. Thanks for your questions. Derron, is there anything, a final piece you wanted to summarize and say before we sign off?
No, just to thank both of you for inviting me. It's been very enjoyable. I've enjoyed the conversation this afternoon, and yeah, look forward to the next one.
Brilliant. Cheers, guys. Thanks, Giles. Thanks, Derron. Thanks, everybody, for joining. And thanks, Lauren, for supporting us in the background. Have a great evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and catch up soon.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.